I've had so many titles since
okay.
high school. So that was I mean, it all relates to where I am now. So my role as a domestic violence advocate was my internship
Okay.
back in undergrad when I went to Penn State. So I did go to Penn State. I majored in criminal justice. I got a bachelor's of science there. And while I was there, I did intern at a courthouse as a domestic violence advocate. So I was in charge of filing protection from abuse orders, which in some states is different. It's called different. So in Pennsylvania, it's called a PFA, protection from abuse. Other places, it's called a restraining order. So I filed that and then went with the person who was filing the order to court. When I graduated, I worked at a group home with young girls who were experiencing some behavioral issues, supporting them in their transition out of the group home, whether it's into a permanent home for adoption or if they were moving to another residential facility. I'm sorry, it's nice out, so you're gonna hear ice cream trucks outside. I live right downtown Newark, in New Jersey, so it's very, very busy. I'm right across the street from City Hall, so I hear everything. Um, so after working at the group home, I had dreams of becoming a lawyer. I've always wanted to work in social justice, in the social justice industry, preferably nonprofit, because they work directly and closely with community members. So I still wanted to have like one foot on the ground and then the other foot working within an agency. So then I studied for the LSAT, toured some law schools, and I did not pass the LSAT twice. So I was like, okay, let me pivot, figure out how can I get to law school. So I figured that going to grad school first would be an easy ticket into law school. And John Jay was a school that I've actually wanted to go to since high school because I was interested in criminal justice issues. But as you know, John Jay doesn't really have like a student campus. My mom wanted me to get the full university experience, so that's how I ended up at Penn State. So I was like, okay, I can revisit John Jay, so that I applied for the Master's of Public Administration program. And like the first day at John Jay, my eyes lit up like a kid at a candy store. I absolutely love this school. I recommend it to almost everyone who asks, like, which school should I apply to? I'm like, John Jay College. What I like most about John Jay is that a lot of my professors were actual practitioners in the fields that I was interested in. So I feel like I had easier access to networking and opportunities going to John Jay. While I was at John Jay, I did two fellowships. I did the TAL fellowship, where I was a public advocacy fellow, stationed at Legal Action Center on Houston Street in Manhattan. And also through the TAL fellowship, they brought in another group because I always express interest in politics as well. So they brought in a group called Ignite National, which is a national political organization that trains young women to run for office. So I ended up joining that fellowship as well as doing the TAL fellowship, as well as going to grad school full time. So I was a busy bee while at John Jay, tapping into any opportunities that I could, making sure I built relationships with my professors so that I have abundance of opportunities after I graduated. So I graduated in 2019, and after that, I got a job at the organization that I'm at right now called Girls for Gender Equity. This organization is based in New York City, and we do policy. Well, we have a couple areas in GGE. So we have our direct service area, which is our programs, and that group works directly with young people on political education and leadership development, professional development. And then I work on a policy team under our campaigns, and we do campaign work for like police free schools and then gender-based violence in schools, and youth policing across New York. We also have now our federal presence with our National Agenda for Black Girls campaign, which aims to bring issues that are impacting Black girls and gender nonconforming youth to a national scale. So I've been here at this organization for a little more than 2 years. I started off as a policy manager, and since then I have been promoted to deputy director of policy. So I spearhead a lot of our policy work. Currently, I am like double zooming. I'm in a public safety hearing in New York City. I have a young person who I help prepare a testimony advocating for police free schools. So that's sort of like a glimpse of the kind of work I do. We do work hand in hand with young people, especially me and my policy work. Like, we don't take on any policy issues unless the young people we work with have identified those issues as something that they care about. So once we provide them with the support and the tools, we then take a step back and let them take the lead, which is why we have I, for the most part, used to testify, but now we have more young people stepping into leadership, and now they are testifying instead of me. So that's what I do in my New York City capacity, but I do live in Newark, New Jersey. I am the president of New Jersey Abortion Access Fund, which is another area of advocacy that I'm passionate about. Anything that tries to restrict the expression or freedom of women, I am on it like white on rice. And so that's when a couple of years ago, when they were talking about rolling back on Roe v. Wade, I was so enraged. I was like, I have to do something. I need to have a protest in front of City Hall. But I'm like, New Jersey don't have these kind of issues. It's down south. So I found the better way to engage in abortion access rights, which was join the board. And essentially, what we do is we fundraise in order to provide financial assistance for people who are seeking abortions. And when I first joined, it was just mostly, folks in Jersey who are going to clinics in New Jersey who need some assistance in funding. So it was like a really light lift. But now that other states in the South have been rolling back on abortion rights, have been banning abortions, we're starting to see a huge influx of patients from down south coming up to DC. DC's abortion clinics have more leeway when it comes to like at what point can you get abortion. So instead of like going up north like New Jersey and New York, where there is a week limit to your abortion, DC has like a longer. Uh, I can't remember the name. It starts with a G, but it's basically how long, like the weeks you're pregnant. You can get a seeking an abortion in DC for a longer time. So we have a lot of people who are going to DC, a lot of people who are coming up to New Jersey, a lot of people coming up to New York. So we've been providing a lot of financial assistance for folks coming from the South up north to gain abortion access. And that's about it. Oh, actually, no, I do have another piece to share. When I was in grad school, I did a lot of self-studying. Like everything that I was learning in my classes in John Jay, I was just like, okay, I need to study more on this issue, on that issue. So with all the like independent studying that I was doing, and I was also engaged in a lot of voter access work here in New Jersey, educating my peers on like what was going on in politics and electoral politics, like who was running for office, what they stand for. I was trying to encourage folks to get registered, actually registering folks, and then reminding them when elections were coming up. I started a business. It started off as me wanting to just put all my thoughts and all the information that I was learning in my independent study on paper and then share it with on a digital blog, but then it then turned into a campaign to get more young people involved in politics, involved in electoral politics, and get them registered to vote. And that was called Black Resource. I did have a fundraising component where like every September I had whether it was like a back to school drive during the pandemic, because young people weren't going to school physically and instead they had to work from home. I did a fundraiser to provide financial support for anyone who needed like Wi-Fi or any tech assistance. So the money I raised for that went to a family who had students who were working from home, and that paid for their Wi-Fi for up to 3 months with the money that I raised. And then after the pandemic, I had like a like a summer play fundraiser, because working at a group home, a lot of the things that we received that allowed the young people to play outside, like bikes and basketball, it was all donated. So there is a local group home in Newark, and they're kind of limited with resources, especially after the pandemic. They weren't receiving enough funding nor enough donations. So I had a fundraiser and had folks donate some bikes, some bathing suits, some undergarments, basketballs, any like outdoor play so that they had, especially because this was before like the world opened up as wide it is as it is. So folks were still limited to like play within like their homes or where they were. So I just wanted the young people to be able to enjoy their summers and not be bored with board games for another year. So, but since last summer, I haven't had the capacity to continue that work under Black Resource. It still exists. The Instagram page still exists. I hope to go back to it. So that's why I haven't completely written it off. But after being promoted, I have a lot more responsibilities. And after being promoted from just a board member to president of NJF, I just don't have the time. But I still do that kind of work on the side, little by little, but just not under the capacity of Black Resource.
Awesome. Thank you. Wow, it's amazing. Folks, the floor is yours. You're more than welcome to ask any questions you have. If you want to speak out, just raise your hand. And if you want to put them on the chat, that's fine. I'll read them out in the chat. But the floor is yours, folks. So please feel free to ask questions. And this is a safe space.
Yeah. And as you can see, based off of like what I just said, I ended up not going to law school. I figured that the way to make the change that I wanted was not through practicing law. And I learned that by being at John Jay and talking to lawyers and then talking to people who do public policy. And I was like, oh, so it's public policy is what I want to do, not being a lawyer. So the lawyer dream has died.
Hey, to the floors of capacity, you're doing a great work.
Yeah.
Nalia, the floor is yours. I hope I pronounced that right.
Hi, yes. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Nyla. Thank you for, having the time to come out and speak to us today. I'm really, like me, your situation, like what you're doing, I'm doing something like exactly the same. I volunteer and I also do policy work at a nonprofit. And we also like work on campaigns regarding homelessness. Mm-hmm. So I just want to know, since I'm also majoring in public administration, and since you're doing public policy, was it necessary for you to take some law classes?
No, it wasn't. I feel like it may be helpful because a lot of legislation impacts, like there's a lot of legal aspects to a lot of the laws and policies that a lot of advocates work on. So I think it is important to be like, just have like the basic one-on-one knowledge of how the legal system can impact the implementation of certain policies. So I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it is helpful. And it might be interesting. I did take a civil rights law class, and it was very interesting in learning like what case laws led to the laws and the policies and the rights that we have today. So that was interesting to know.
Thank you. Because even though sometimes we brainstorm on what policy will work, and I found that when I come up with ideas, I'm always, hit against a brick wall because, New York City have other administration codes that I'm not aware of. Mm-hmm. that some laws would be, how they call it, pre-exempt or something like that, where that another state government or federal, we overstepping our boundaries in certain cases. So so that's why I asked. Thank you so much.
No problem. And yeah, like I said, it's helpful to know so that you are able to like adequately strategize on your campaigns, like what bills you want to pass, and like understanding the components of the bill and how the law may impact it. Like, for example, my organization worked on a bill that just passed in 2020 called the Police Secrecy Law. It was to remove line 50A from a law that already exists, which allows the NYPD to seal a lot of information. So what we wanted to do, like if there were folks who are victims of police brutality or had family members who were killed at the hands of police, if you were to request the police officers' disciplinary records under the law, it was sealed and you couldn't get access to it. So there was no way for you to really build a case on why this police officer should be held accountable, because you couldn't see like if they have done these things in the past. So once that bill passed, it removed like it was, you know how bills have like a whole bunch of like lines and then you have like sublines. So it was like line 50 and then section A, which gave police officers those protections. So this bill removed that part of the law. But even in its implementation, there's loopholes in the law, in that whole entire law that already exists. There's loopholes that then allowed police departments to expose folks who write reports on like police officers, especially as it pertains to like sexual violence reports. It did not redact the victim's name. So if there is a family who's requesting the disciplinary records of a police officer and they have a history of sexual violence in the past, a past victim who have reported that police officer's name was then exposed, and that is a privacy issue. So now we have to go back and pass another bill to add the language in that victims of sexual violence, their names, or just victims in general who have been harmed by a police officer, their names should be redacted from the record when someone is requesting the disciplinary record of an NYPD officer. So it was like so many small loopholes, and like we didn't catch that because a lot of folks are just, you know, are in policy and are just general community members who are into advocacy. And these are languages that we miss within bills. So then we do have now like some lawyers on staff who are able to read through this legislation and identify legal loopholes that would then counteract all the work that we were doing. So it is important to have some legal knowledge, or just have a nice little lawyer on hand who can also read it and help you.
Yeah, thank you. Because I did have experience with that. With that, last year we had passed the city council intro 146 was basically increasing the city feds vouchers to market rate with fair rate rent in New York City. And come to find out, although it will increase the voucher, however, it didn't. Throughout the whole implementation, which is always an issue when we want bills passed, it was that the issue was that it didn't allow people to like actually work where they're able to sustain themselves. So it's like they had to be within the income bracket.
Yeah.
So if they was a little over that, which is working 40 hours a week, minimum wage, they would be, you know, basically wouldn't be eligible for the program. So we had to go back, go through the rulemaking process, because the city agency had basically where people like make public testimonies, comments on the issue, where that they could go and make any changes.
Yeah.
So I understand exactly what you mean with the implementation process and the issues that comes with that.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't realize that a bill that you're pushing isn't that well thought out until it gets to the implementation phase, because then the city agencies who have to then abide by these policies are like, well, we have a way around this. And they keep it in their back pocket while you're pushing for it. Like, okay, you're going to get your cute little bill. And then when it's time for implementation, they pull out all the legal protections that they have. And it's just like, how did we miss this? So that's why it's always important to have someone either on staff or in hand, or if you just have, like, if you know how to read legal language and be able to decipher it in writing a bill or pushing for a bill, then you'll be able to identify those loopholes so that you don't have to go back and do the work all over again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any questions? And folks, be aware, you don't have to speak out. You can always write it in the chat too as well, if you're camera shy. Not everyone at once.
Or if you are considering a career path in public policy, there's so many ways that you can go about it. Like, you could go to law school and not practice law, but still work in public policy. Nonprofits are like the best place to push for policy and work in the policy world, or you can run for office, um, or you can work for a city agency, but you won't necessarily be making any policy changes. You would just be implementing the policy that was then passed. So like there's many ways that you can go about doing public policy work. But it is a fulfilling job, especially if you're doing the work with the community members that's directly impacted by the issues you're fighting for. It gives you a sense of hope and like it keeps you going. Like us working with young people is like it's like the least exhausting work. Working with only adults is exhausting, but when you have add young people into the mix because they're so raw and they're so like authentically themselves, and as people get older, they start to like shell themselves in or kind of just like perform a lot. Whereas you get young people and they're just themselves all the time, and it's like a breath of fresh air. And they know what to do. It's just they don't have the tools, or adults are not willing to invest that patience and that time to build them up, build their knowledge, provide them with political education, and really like be with them step by step. But once they have those tools, they're ready to go. Like for instance, the young person I had testifying at the public safety hearing, I told them like, you know, there's 3 agencies testifying first. The agencies always testify first, and then there's public coming at the end. So please feel free to step away from your computer, go outside, and I'll call you when they open the floor up for public hearing. And they were just like, no, this is actually interesting. I've never seen the city council, I've never been exposed to the city council questioning like agencies like the NYPD and asking questions that we ask ourselves all the time. So they was like, no, I actually rather stay for the whole hearing. It's 2:06 and they're only on the second agency. They still have a whole other agency and it started at 9:30. So like the young people are willing to do the work. They just have to be prepared. Like after 2 weeks of preparing this person to testify, now they're like completely invested on a nice Friday where it's like 70 degrees outside. So that's impressive. And that's what you get when you really pour into young people and provide them with the tools and then step back. Like I could have testified today on the behalf of young people, but I was like, why? When they can just, I'd rather city council members hear directly from the people who are mostly impacted from having police officers in school.
Good. Folks, any other questions, concerns? Looks like we'd be a short session, but very, very informative. I will say. Any last questions, concerns? I know you probably all itching. It's Friday, 70 degrees.
Outside, yeah.
Well,
Before we break, I do want to give a piece of advice. I did a career event for high school students last weekend, and my first piece of advice was to apply for a CUNY school. I'm gonna recommend that all the time, especially if you're so undecided at such a young age. And like, please do not waste your time and your money on an expensive university when you can go to a CUNY school and have an abundance of opportunities to be plugged into the industries that you're most interested in. And you can really figure yourself out at a CUNY school because there's so many opportunities. I was from going to Penn State, which is one of the biggest universities in the country, and not being connected to any opportunity, like fellowship opportunities, job opportunities. I literally left Penn State with $100K student loan bill and nothing to show for it besides a piece of paper that said I went to Penn State. But going to John Jay, I was like so amazed at how much they have to offer and how many practitioners are there and that are willing to connect you to anyone that they know. And I feel like I just should have went to John Jay first and maybe got an apartment in the city, and that would have been my university experience. But I absolutely love John Jay, and just explore all the fellowships and internships that they offer and tap in with your professors because they know a lot and they get so excited when you're showing an interest in what they're teaching. They're like buying you books and connecting you with this person. Like I have so much, like I got so much from going to John Jay, and I would go to John Jay over and over again if I can do it for free.
Thank you for preaching that, because I get kind of told like a parent, yeah, sure. I'm like, there's a lot of plenty of opportunity. It's great to hear from someone who's not me working there, or not like a parent there,
Yeah.
hearing it from outside, and I hope you folks all take the opportunity to do so. Any final thoughts, questions, folks? I take that as a no. I guess everyone wants to really get out on their Friday. All right, Quadira, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to see us, and from your bringing in your knowledge and bringing in your wealth of knowledge and experience. I want to give a hand out, a clap out. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know I wish it was more in person, but this will do, and it's something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you folks for all coming on a Friday. And again, if you have any further questions or concerns, I'm going to put my email on the chat just in case. If any folks have any questions, concerns they might want. And I hope you folks have a nice Friday. Enjoy the weekend. And take care, all right? Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for having me.